So in this video, I have an important update on the California rifle ban case called Miller v. Bonta. The Ninth Circuit is at it once again, and they're defying the Supreme Court, and they're doing this to protect this rifle ban. So let's talk about what just happened. But real quick, before we jump into this video, I want to ask you guys for a huge favor. I was looking at some of my analytics, and about 60% of all my viewers who watch every single day are actually not subscribed to the channel. That means that there could be like 60,000 people who watch this video who aren't actually subscribed to the channel. So if you want to support the channel in a free way and help this two-way content get out to more people, please consider subscribing to the channel. That really does help, and thank you guys so much for all of your support. As I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we need to talk about what is happening in the Miller v. Bonta case, which is a challenge to the state of California's ban on so-called assault weapons. This case was recently argued in front of the Ninth Circuit this last Wednesday when I was actually at SHOT Show. I wasn't able to listen live, but when I got back to my hotel later that day, I listened to the arguments, and my impression, with a lot of people, is that this was not going to go our way. That was almost a given, especially because of the judges that were on this panel, Judges Berzon, Nguyen, and Miller. It did not look good for us. And then if you listen to the oral arguments, it was very clear that at least Berzon and Nguyen were not going to side with us. And then Judge Miller also was going to try to do something that, again, was not going to be in our favor. As you may recall, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals recently granted California's request for an emergency administrative stay, which was against the injunction we received by Judge Benitez against this ban on so-called assault weapons in California. But now that stay, which was issued by that motions panel, is going to remain in place for the foreseeable future because of what the Ninth Circuit panel just did in the order that they just issued. After the oral arguments, which were heard earlier this week, the Ninth Circuit panel here in this Miller case have now put Miller on hold, essentially for the foreseeable future until the Ninth Circuit en banc panel issues their ruling in the other case that deals with California, which is the Duncan v. Bonta California magazine ban case. The issue with this new order in Miller is the fact that it is built on a prior decision by the Ninth Circuit en banc panel to take the magazine ban case as a comeback case. That decision by the Ninth Circuit en banc panel in Duncan broke multiple rules to essentially make that happen, to have that review once again. And currently, that aspect, that process is actually being briefed and challenged in Duncan on whether or not the Ninth Circuit en banc panel could even do that. Did they even have the power to do that? That also means that there is a small but unlikely chance that the Ninth Circuit en banc panel could rule this year that they didn't even have the power to hear the Duncan case, as a comeback case, and then they could ultimately kick that case back down to the lower court for re-review. That would also mean that Miller right now being put on hold for Duncan and waiting for the Duncan case to be resolved would ultimately mean that, hey, this was all just a big waste of time. The Miller case was put on hold. Duncan could be kicked back down because it shouldn't have went en banc, and then Miller would need to get restarted, and all this hold, all this delay was improper. I will say, though, after listening to the oral arguments in Miller, the three judges really did not understand this issue and automatically took the position of essentially putting this case on hold, which is exactly what they did. Now, I will not say that them issuing a decision would have been favorable at all. If anything, if they did issue an actual decision on Miller on the merits, it probably would not have been good. They were likely not going to rule in our favor, but the tactic that they're taking right now is simply to put this case on hold. Now, the order of the court from the judges are Judges Berzon, Nguyen, and Miller, and they state in the order that this case shall be held in abeyance and submission is withdrawn pending resolution of Duncan v. Bonta. The stay entered on October 28, 2023 shall remain in effect pending further order of the court. So a simple two-sentence order will hold the California rifle ban case essentially in limbo for another year, likely maybe even longer. Now, for those not aware, Miller v. Bonta is a challenge to the state of California's ban on so-called assault weapons. Under California Penal Code Section 30515, the state of California bans various types of firearms based on their characteristics. For example, something like a semi-automatic centerfire rifle, something like an AR-15 with a detachable magazine, cannot have a flash hider, a collapsible stock, or even a forward vertical grip. If it does have any of those characteristics, then it's defined as a so-called assault weapon. This Miller case was originally heard years prior in the lower court in a Southern District Court before Judge Roger T. Benitez. And on review, on the merits of the case, he ultimately ruled in favor of us, the plaintiffs, granted a motion for summary judgment, striking down this law. And he used something, prior to Bruin, which was text as informed by relevant history and tradition. After his original decision, the state of California appealed that up to the Ninth Circuit. And the Ninth Circuit did grant the appeal, but then the Miller case essentially sat on hold in the Ninth Circuit. Miller sat with a bunch of other cases that were backlogged because of the Supreme Court reviewing the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin case. After the Supreme Court issued that Bruin decision, All these other cases got moving, and eventually Miller was sent back down to Judge Benitez for him to redecide the case, reevaluate it in light of Bruen. And surprise, surprise, nothing changed. All Judge Benitez did was make his decision even stronger, and now he had Bruen to support his position. However, he put a 10-day stay on that new decision so California could appeal up to the Ninth Circuit, and that's exactly what they did. They filed an appeal and then also sought an emergency motion for a stay pending appeal. Well, the panel that reviewed that emergency order ended up granting California's request for a stay, but they also expedited review of this Miller case in the Ninth Circuit. So in that order, the Ninth Circuit motions panel said that they were going to grant the stay in Miller based on the stay that was granted in the Duncan case by the Ninth Circuit en banc panel. So they are going to link these cases together. That's exactly what they're doing right now. However, they try to win over people by saying, well, don't worry, we're also going to expedite review in the Miller case. But when all this came to a head, essentially all this led to was an expedited review in the Miller case, which simply meant they fast-tracked a review of this case to then put it on hold. Now, we talked about the Duncan case in prior videos, but the en banc panel essentially bent all their rules to take the Duncan case back as a comeback case and then issued a stay on the Benitez magazine ban decision. When the Ninth Circuit did this, there were judges like Judge Nelson, Van Dyke, and Bumate that pointed out how the en banc panel was going to break their rules, and they exactly did break their rules. Now, because of all the backlash from the judges in the Ninth Circuit and all the people seeing what the Ninth Circuit was doing, they did request briefs on whether or not they actually had the authority to do that. So right now, there are briefs being submitted to the Ninth Circuit in the Duncan case on whether or not the Duncan case should even be in front of them and whether or not they even have that authority. So there is also a chance that the Duncan case ultimately, when all is said and done, the en banc panel there could hear oral arguments or review the briefs and say, you know what, you're right, we don't have authority to do this, and then kick it back down. But then that would mean Miller being put on hold for Duncan would also be, pretty ridiculous considering the fact that Duncan right now, there's a huge question mark about whether or not the en banc panel can actually be reviewing this case. So you can see how this has become a huge cluster. Now, listening to the recent oral arguments in the Miller case, you could hear and essentially tell how biased judges Berzon and Nguyen were against the Second Amendment. Multiple times they called AR-15s machine guns, and even at one point, I believe Judge Berzon called them an A-15. So they just have no technical knowledge on firearms at all. They have no idea of what's being challenged in this case, and then they also have no concept about what these firearms are and how come they are. Judges Berzon and Nguyen stated multiple times that the common use test outlined in Heller and Bruen is circular. So they were pretty much pushing back against the Supreme Court themselves, saying that under Heller, under Bruen, the common use test is circular and should not be used. Judge Nguyen went even so far as to challenge the statistics that there are millions of AR-15s and other semi-automatic rifles in possession of millions and millions of gun owners across the nation. In fact, at one point, Judge Nguyen even just put forward arguments kind of on her own that maybe the numbers should be looked at only those firearms that are possessed in California. So it was very interesting. They were pushing back heavily against the common use test. All in all, it was very clear to me and everyone else who listened to the Miller oral arguments that not only are these judges in Miller not going to faithfully apply Heller and Bruen even when they decide this case, but right now they're just not going to want to deal with this case at all, that they were going to put this case on hold, and that's exactly what they did. I was asked multiple times at SHOT Show what I thought was going to happen in the Miller case, and I told everybody that's exactly what was going to happen. There were plenty of lines of questions about putting this case on hold, and that just signaled to everyone that's exactly what they were going to do, and that's what they did. So now all eyes are going to be on the Duncan California magazine ban case that is in the Ninth Circuit in front of the en banc panel. Now these cases are going to be linked together going forward, and right now the Duncan case is currently set to be heard the week of March 18th. Then we will wait essentially to see what the decision of the Ninth Circuit en banc panel will be. My opinion is it's not going to be a favorable decision. I don't even necessarily need to listen to the oral arguments because remember, this same 11-judge panel already heard the Duncan case prior and upheld the California magazine ban. So I don't think anything is going to change even like Bruen because the Ninth Circuit, all these judges, a bunch of judges on the Ninth Circuit are not faithfully applying what the Supreme Court said in Bruen. They didn't even faithfully apply Heller and McDonald prior, and I don't think anything's going to change in the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit is one of the most overturned courts. They do not like the Second Amendment. They have not really ever upheld Second Amendment cases. They've, especially the en banc panel level, has not ruled in our favor ever in a 2A case. So I don't think anything is going to change in this case. And ultimately, I think Duncan is going to have to make its way back up to the Supreme Court, which means likely the Miller case is going to sit on hold for a very long time, waiting for the Duncan case to be resolved. So I want to make everyone aware of what's going on. This is going to be significant. Miller is probably going to be on hold for a very long time. So I wanted to get you guys that information. Not great news, but that is what's happening in Miller. So if you guys have any questions, go ahead and comment down below and I will try to answer to the best of my ability. Also, if you like this video and you'd like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help to fuel the algorithm and it signals to YouTube that you guys see value in these videos and in this type of 2A news. So as always, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.